Ward 2. So one of the wards where the largest neighborhood that would be affected by this ordinance is. So first, you probably have seen this on social media or on our website. We're talking about Chapter 20 of the Township Code that requires sidewalks to be constructed with every new home that's built. We already have a different code that requires them to be put in with subdivision, and the developer will always construct sidewalks. But now we're seeing some in neighborhoods without sidewalks, and sometimes current residents have decided to demolish their homes and rebuild them. Or you've also seen flippers come in and knock down the house and rebuild them. And a lot of these residents that are building them have come to council and they're asking for a waiver for the sidewalks, citing the following reasons. The cost is on them. The difficulty of working around existing trees and other obstacles, the future of maintenance and shoveling, the liability, and then the fact that in some instances the sidewalk wouldn't connect to other sidewalks because their neighborhoods do not have sidewalks. So in our 2040 plan, we have that we want to have greater walkability of the township, but we don't necessarily want that to be at the expense of the residents. And so we're trying to get feedback from you to see what you would want in this situation. We don't want to force anyone to put in sidewalks that can't afford them or doesn't want to have them. So really, the biggest neighborhood that's affected is Plymouth Valley. And the question on the table right now is really, should the code be changed? Should we enforce the code with a rare exception? However, if we kept the code as is, it would, in order to actually create walkability, it would probably take something like 80 years. Because what's going to happen is people are going to buy a lot, build a house, put in the sidewalk right in front of it, and then there might not be a sidewalk next to it until that house is knocked down and built. So there's not a ton of people here. We do have cards that you can fill out and you could submit your questions, or since this is a smaller group, you can come up one by one and give your opinion on the situation. The only thing I would like to establish from the beginning is that this is the only topic on the table tonight, so we're not going to talk about things that aren't related, and we'll let you know if you start to bring up something that's not related. And then number two, the township is not in a position to construct sidewalks in neighborhoods for you throughout the township, and tax dollars can't be used to improve private property. Grants are not likely for individual sidewalks, and the township has many other infrastructure projects in the queue. And that's about it for right now. So I would love to, Nick, do you want to add anything?
No, I think you covered it pretty well.
So I guess I'm going to open it up to you, to whoever wants to come and say their opinion. You're going to have to identify your name, that you're a Plymouth Township resident, and you can come up and do it here. If you want to form a line, if you know you want to speak, feel free. I'm going to turn the microphone around to you.
I don't want sidewalks. Okay. I'll just be clear.
Well, that's what we want to hear.
I'm Donna Dugan. I live on Clover Lane, so I am in the community. First of all, I moved here 27 years ago, and we've never had sidewalks. And I have not seen any problem with people walking up and down the street. I see hundreds of people every day. Number two, this is an expense. We're getting ready to retire, right? And when we bought our house, it was a piece of crap. I'll be honest with you. And there was no regulations by this committee on that house. So now that we've put a ton of money, a ton of time, the house is paid for, if you mandate sidewalks, I don't want to pay for that. I'm getting ready to retire, so you're going to put a lien on my house if I can't afford it. Is that correct? Sure, that's fine. Sure.
So to be clear, this would only be if you were trying to knock down your house and build a new house in place of it. It wouldn't be, so we're not going to say, oh, you live here and you have to put in a sidewalk because there's not one. It's not that. It's only when the house is being knocked down and rebuilt.
Okay, that's reassuring. I'm not knocking his house down. I'm going to die in the damn house. Okay. So, and if you made me get a lien, my kid would have to deal with it because I'm never paying it, okay? But the other thing is there are so many obstacles on the valley streets. There's trees, there's, some people's sewer lines go almost right up to where a sidewalk would have to go. There's a fire hydrant in front of my house. I don't want to pay for any of that. And I really don't think even if you put sidewalks in, people aren't going to walk on them. If you really want to do something constructive, enforce the traffic violations that happen in that valley. People, including the cops, sorry, they go through stop signs, they speed. That's really the issue. It's not walkability, it's not sidewalks, it's people fly down those back streets. So that's really what I feel the challenge is. As long as you tell me I don't have to put sidewalks in, I'm good.
And also, to be clear, I live in a neighborhood, the entire neighborhood, I live across Germantown Pike from the valley. I see people walk in my neighborhood, which has full sidewalks, and they all walk in the street. So I understand what you're saying.
The kids are going to ride their bikes in the street.
Right.
So they're useless.
Good evening. Sheldon Simpson, 722 Clover Lane. As some people know, Karen, I probably served this township more than most of you people have lived here. Zoning, planning, and council as chair of every one of them. We've always had this in place, and the council has the ability to make an exception, a waiver for sidewalks, and it's always been done in the past that if you do that, it's in a condition that the owner of the property understands that when the township decides to put a sidewalk in, that they will put them in at their expense. That's what the policy has always been here. I don't know what the problem is, why we're wasting time on a town hall meeting if this is about new construction, whether they should put sidewalks in or not. That's up to you. I mean, if we have enough houses that get built down the road and you say put them in, at that time they have to put them in. So I'm not sure, why we're here about this policy when it has nothing to do with most of the residents in the community. As you said, it may take 80 years for this to fruition to have sidewalks throughout Plymouth Township. And as Donna said, who's going to pay to move the hydrants? Who's going to pay to move the telephone poles that are in the way? Is it that expense of the property owner? You're talking, a lot of money just to do that. And you build I know there's people here to build these houses and doing that. I mean, that's on them. That's what they incur when they decide to do that. But as a homeowner, if you down the road this goes and we have so many houses that now have sidewalks, and the township decides to, okay, let's get the rest of them done. We're going to make the residents do it, however they're going to do it. Now you have a lot of expense that somebody's got to incur, whether it be the township or the residents. Somebody's going to incur it, and there's a lot of obstacles along those roads in Plymouth Valley. No, it's mine.
So, to be clear, you're saying you would like us to keep the ordinance as is so that those sidewalks slowly get put in? Or are you saying, I also heard, I heard that, but I also heard if we do that, later are you going to come back and say, well, now everyone who doesn't have a sidewalk needs to put one in?
Well, obviously, that's not going to be your choice. You won't be here 20, 30 years from now. But that may be something that's going to happen down the road if we put enough of them in. The policies, the code says they have to be put in, period. End of discussion. So I don't know why we're here. The question is whether council wants to waive those new construction projects. And the policy's always been, when I was on council for 8 years, that we would waive it with the condition that they understood, and it was in the conditional agreement, that those sidewalks would be put in at the homeowner's expense when the township decided to put sidewalks in. So that policy's been for a long time. I don't know if it's changed, but it's ultimately up to council what they want to do when these projects are built. They can waive them. They can say, no, we're not waiving them. But that's always the way it's been. It was a simple, okay, you're right. You're the only house out of, entire block that has sidewalks, and we understand your situation. But when we want them in, you will put them in at your expense, no questions asked. And that's what it's always been.
The question continues to come up as existing homes are being knocked down and rebuilt.
I just want to say, you're exactly right in that the council has the right to say, we're going to waive this. But the whole reason we put it out for discussion is because we found ourselves recently waiving more. Like, there were more waivers than sidewalks. So then it caused us to sort of ask the question, well, should we adjust this ordinance, this expectation that there's sidewalks? Because if we're waiving, most of the time, someone's coming to us and saying it's a sidewalk to nowhere, there's a tree there, my front yard's already really small. If we have more waivers than sidewalks, maybe it's time just to question, like, the basis for the ordinance. So that's why we put it out for discussion. Is it an ordinance that people are in favor of? Yes, walkability, even if it takes 80 years. Or should we adjust the expectation? So just to kind of respond to your question about, like, why.
I think somebody can correct me. What's there, a dozen new homes in the valley out of 400?
276 homes in the valley.
Did you count every one of them today?
I know. I'm here too long.
So there you go. So I know what you're saying, but if council continues the way it was going, then eventually when you get 200 houses built, then you say, okay, we want them built. We want your sidewalks in now. And then maybe at that time we can look at it different. I mean, obviously, excuse me, guys, we won't be here, but obviously at that time council can look at it and say, okay, let's use liquid fuels. Let's get a state grant. Let's see what we can do to do this. So, thank you. Well,
How old that ordinance is? Very old.
1950 when the Valley Houses were built.
Karen, can we look that up? That should
I
be
sure
the
can.
news.
Well, I can look it up.
I vote for that.
let's take a vote.
That's the issue. But we've also heard a lot of people say, we'd like a more walkable township. What are you doing for it to help create greater walkability?
Right.
Yeah.
But then everyone walks in the street when they go.
I see that every day.
If you have an ordinance and you're always waiving it, maybe the ordinance needs to be changed. So that you have some objective criteria where you can say, what are the criteria? How do we decide to give a waiver?
But how many people have actually been hit by a car in the valley? I've lived here 27 years and I don't know one person being hit. And we're talking, we've got, yes, good thing. But we've got kids on illegal little scooters and stuff. I mean, there's more important things in my head from a safety perspective. They walk in the street anyway, even if you have sidewalks. The traffic, the ordinance that governs traffic, like, they don't fly down the street. I mean, I stood by the, right behind the Valley Tavern. You get on at 2 o'clock in the morning, right? I mean, that's my, I'm sorry,
Anna Henninger, I live on Erlin Road. This, I think, is an issue for me because my husband and I are talking about the possibility of rebuilding. We're a corner lot, so we have some 200 foot of sidewalk, and there's probably 0 houses around us that would put sidewalk in, just because I understand a lot of builders are doing it. You've let them get away with it, which is great if it continues that way and it becomes my situation. However, not every house in the valley is going to get knocked down. It's just, there's houses that don't warrant it. They already have second stories, they have additions, the houses that are getting knocked down are original square footage, they're run down, they're abandoned, whatever it might be. So you're talking about a handful, 50% of houses that you're going to now start to require it on potentially to never have connection. And it gets to the point where it's like, well, why do I have to suffer for the next however long if I choose to rebuild if you're never going to enforce it in the whole neighborhood? Because then it becomes pointless for me to have to incur that expense when I've been saving and wanting to do this, and you've let builders get away with it who are just it cuts their profit. They're not losing money. They're not, making a mortgage any more expensive. But in my case, it would. So it just doesn't make sense. If you don't have a long-term plan, a long short-term plan to enforce it throughout the whole neighborhood, there's no sense in requiring individual houses to have it if they're never going to connect.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ed Sturman. I live on Pleasant Road, and I've been in the township for 42 years. When I bought my house. The ordinance, I believe, if you look at the houses they've torn down and rebuilt, there's probably 20 or 25. If you put the sidewalk in, okay, I can't see someone who's walking down the street going to walk up on the sidewalk and come back down again. I can't see that, okay? All the people that walk in the street, talk to everybody. And like I said, you have over 200 and some homes in this township, up in here, between here and up by Mill Creek and all that whole area. It would be benefactor just to change it and leave it alone, because the new houses you have put in up there, they have nice front yards now with no sidewalks. It doesn't bother anybody. It really doesn't. And I'm one that goes for walks with a lot of people, and the kids have been real good too. And like the lady stated, you're going to have to change your water lines, and at my expense, when you're on a fixed budget, when you're retired, I'll tell you, for being here this long and knowing people who live around my street, you're going to get a bunch of people in here giving you problems. I just know that for a fact, because they've been around a long time. I think it's a good idea, but in the valley, no. I can understand new development, anything with 10 or 12, 14 homes for the sidewalk. But in the valley, I am completely against it. Okay? And that's all I have to say.
Thank you very
much. My name is Steven. I am a member of the Valley. I live on Erlin Road. I share the same sentiment. I think sidewalks to nowhere would be a liability for people. The gentleman said he's a corner lot and he would need to be ADA compliant. No handicapped person can go on there, because where are they going to get off, right? So you're making it harder for people to actually walk, and you're taking away from people's properties, and you're putting the burden of the money on the people that have to do the work, right? Whether it's a homeowner, whether it's a builder, if you're going to make this a requirement, everybody should have to do it. It's going to look ugly. So in 10 years, if I put a brand new sidewalk in today, in 10 years I put a new one next to it, how's that old sidewalk going to look? It's going to look horrible. It's going to be 10 years weathered to a new sidewalk. There's going to be tripping hazards. If these sidewalks break, you got to keep up with the maintenance, or you get fined. So I think you should just change the ordinance to not requiring it, because part of your 2040 plan said infill development should look like the rest of the neighborhood. Well, the rest of the neighborhood doesn't have sidewalks. So on that 2040 plan, you want to stay consistent with the rest of the neighborhood. Well, requiring sidewalks would not do so. So that's all I got.
My name is Barbara Lynch. I'm on Erlin Road. I don't have any new construction concerns to talk about. I just want to talk about the sense that to put this burden on new construction or builders or regular homeowners who just want to upgrade their own home isn't really fair to them when the rest of the township, or the rest of the neighborhood, sorry, I'm nervous, when the rest is not like that. I did notice something that Shelley said. The telephone poles are very close to the street. They would have to be moved back in order to get new sidewalks put in. That's a huge expense. I agree with the corner lots. That's really not beneficial. Sidewalks to nowhere. One option to present is to maybe have bike lanes, but walking lanes put in instead in those places. I also agree with the resident from Clover that, to my knowledge, there has been no pedestrian strikes in the valley for as long as I've lived here, which has been 27 years. So the different options are available for our neighborhood in particular. So I just would like to say that I don't agree with the ordinance the way it stands.
So you would like us to change the ordinance?
Yes, for existing neighborhoods. For new neighborhoods, 100%. Put in the sidewalks. Yeah.
To be clear, that like a new neighborhood essentially would be a subdivision, and that's already required.
But for like our neighborhood, for Penn Road, Volpe Road, Terrace Road, all of those don't have sidewalks. So that's a lot of expense for new, people who want to upgrade their home, by knocking it down and rebuilding new. It's an unfair to the builders for having to do the spot zoning kind of thing. So that's really not fair either. So.
Well, it wasn't necessarily a complaint. It was somewhat what Lynn was speaking about earlier, where people are coming in and requesting waivers. And so after a certain number of waivers, then you ask if you should change the ordinance or not. Another thing is we are trying to have more town halls and have more transparency in the township and more communication between us and the residents. And this was one more topic that we added to the list. Yeah. Yeah, I did see, yeah.
People park on both sides. The school buses have a hard time. The trash trucks have a hard time.
Yeah.
And everybody has driveways, parking driveway.
I agree.
Not in scope. Hello, Dan Stauffenberg, Valley resident since 2016. I'm not in favor of enforcing Chapter 20 of the Township Code, requiring sidewalks for new builds primarily in the Valley. I'm also not in favor of I am in favor of the current practice of waiving or removing sidewalk requirements for new builds in the Valley. I have a question and then two comments. So the question revolves around, if you did go through with this, most driveways are shared driveways. Where do you draw the line? Do we put the sidewalk in the middle of our shared driveway? Do I stop on my side of the shared driveway? Do we go all the way through the shared driveway? I don't expect an answer tonight. If you have one, I'll take it. But so take it backwards, right? And you'd have to outline that, but that should be outlined if you were to proceed, right? Where do we draw that line? Because now we're going back to curb appeal. It look really funky depending on how you do this or how you enforce it. So that goes to my concerns, right? Curb appeal, you're not talking for the next year or 4 years or 5 years. You're talking for the next decades with an S on the end. You guys already, said that. So negative curb appeal for the decades. I just rebuilt my home. I'm staying here for the long term. I want it to look good for the long term as well. Usability. I think Ed or someone else said it. You're not going to go on my sidewalk, then go to the street, walk 6 more houses, then go back to a sidewalk. That's the way it would be for a long time until rebuilds happen. So not in favor. Thank you for your time. Do you have any questions for me? No. Thank you.
Hey, what are you doing? Ben Gibbons, Plymouth Township resident since 2012. Unpopular opinion. I think that new houses should have required to have sidewalks. I think the code should be enforced. I've been to numerous township meetings over the years, and council's always had the spirit of, walkability, and one day it will connect. So I think we have the code for a reason. The code's there. I live in a neighborhood where there is 99% have sidewalks, and it's a great thing. I see people use them all the time. We have lower amounts of people in the street. The kids are safer up on the sidewalks, and especially if they were just at their own house, right? So when my kids are a little bit older now, but I moved here when my kids were infants and toddlers, and it is a safety barrier from the street, and I really appreciated it. And it really does connect communities. And I am inundated with people from Bluebell that don't have sidewalks. They come, they walk their dogs, they jog. There's always somebody on my sidewalk walking by, jogging, running, biking. There's a common loop that goes from Jolly Road, and the joggers come and they go through the park and they come up through our neighborhood because we have sidewalks. Halloween, I get inundated with kids from the Valley and Bluebell and Norristown, all these areas that don't have sidewalks, and that's great. It's a great community function. It's a great community thing. We welcome people because they don't have sidewalks and they come here. So I totally agree that it should never be on the homeowner. That's not the spirit of the law. It's not the spirit of the code. But if you're going to build in Plymouth Township, that is your expense to build a house and build it into your budget. And if I'm going to tear my house down and I'm going to rebuild my house, then I'll put that in my budget as well if I needed to replace or improve the sidewalk. It's something that's there. Like I said, codes exist for a reason, and I think this is a great code to enforce. And the long-term vision of the rate, so there's like 200 and some homes, you already have rebuilt 25. Imagine if they all had sidewalks. We're on pace to rebuild the entire valley. And
It'll never happen. No way, dude.
And
you don't live in the valley.
And I'm
You're not in there, man.
I don't, but I do live in Plymouth Township, and so yeah. I let you guys speak, and and it doesn't mean everyone has to agree with me. I'm just sharing my opinion, and I believe that the code should stay and it should be enforced throughout the entire township as well, if you build. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Vincent. I live on Sandy Hill Street. I'm a new member of the community, so I just came here last year. So, but thank you. I was silent person on like normal days, but I just hear you said people come from Norristown. That's a great thing. I live right next to the border of Norristown. I would tell you this is not a great thing. Like I've only been here for 1 year, already got things stolen in the backyard. Just this month, I have to visit police here for 3 times. People just drive onto our drive lane, even in the evening with their headlamp turned off. That's scary. And I have to come here. And last night, 2 days ago, I come here and the police, the officer said every police is already on the road, so nobody can take my police report. So I think, to me, increasing living in the border next to Norristown, increased walkability is a threat to safety. Just sharing my personal experience.
Thank you.
Hello, Amanda. I live on Erlin Road. I actually just did a new build recently, and I just want to say I'm against the ordinance. I've been in the Valley for 10 years, originally in one of the original ranches. Me and my family decided we wanted to grow, expand, stay in the Valley. We love our neighbors, we love the neighborhood. We often walk the neighborhood on the street, and I do agree that sidewalks would be a great thing, but not at the homeowner's expense, right? I think it would be awesome if the whole community had sidewalks, just not for us to have to individually do it when we do construction at our homes. It doesn't make any sense. It's a safety hazard and a liability on the homeowner. But I just want to address something, that was said. When you talk about building that into a budget, my builder said it could have cost me upwards of $10,000 by the time I removed a massive oak tree in my front yard and put in the sidewalk. It would have cost me another 10 grand that I didn't have. So it's not always possible to add that into your budget without the expense of something else. So I'm against the ordinance. Thank you.
How are you? I'm Rick. I live over on Erlin Road, about 10 years. We had a 1,600 square foot home. We knocked it down and rebuilt. So again, as Amanda before me just said, it would have been an extra added cost to us. It wouldn't have been to the builder because we were rebuilding our own home. And a lot of the people are in the neighborhood. I know about 2 or 3 other people that are looking to do that. So I know I'm not the only one. And as far as the sidewalks go with the kids going for Halloween, they'd be 80 years old by the time we would have sidewalks, so the kids today wouldn't really be using them. But no, I agree with everyone else. I think you should change the ordinance. And I think that if there was a way to do it where, 80 years from now everybody could do it all at once, or the township could come in. I personally know, I'm not going to give his name, but he ran a township near here, and he developed a 20-year plan where they put sidewalks in. They did, a street a year, and it took him, and they got it done. His whole time he was there, he was able to do them with his township. I don't know how he did it. I was actually going to ask him if he would come here today, but he's not a township, he's not a resident, so it wouldn't have helped, I guess. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know that I am, against the ordinance as it's written now. So, thank you.
As a resident here, I'm against the ordinance for sure. As a professional planner, actually, I'm more curious on the reason of having this ordinance is had to improve the term walkability, right? But for most of the case that we were working on, like in my project, when improving the walkability, is generally to improve the pedestrian accessibility from an origin to a key destination, basically. And those key destinations, which is the trip attraction point, usually, for example, train station, major retail corridors. I barely made the case that improving the walkability within a purely residential neighborhood, which is where we are right now. So the ordinance that we're using here, just to randomly picking the point to increasing, like to add a sidewalk on certain residential neighborhood, or the overall sense does not make sense in general to improve the walkability. If we, for example, someday we have a train station, like Country, and there's a certain neighborhood around the train station that requires that kind of the connection to a certain destination point from the surrounding neighborhood, I would understand that. It's just at this point, from our valley, from the general land use point of view, I feel like it's not the best location to assign this kind of mission or goals to this neighborhood. That's my opinion here. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
What are the next steps? I'm not exactly sure.
Want an ordinance to be effective, then we look at rewriting an ordinance, because the way it's going now is that people just come one by one by one by one, and we give a waiver. Well, then we don't really have an ordinance, because all we're doing is waiving. And the other thing is, what if someone wants a waiver and it doesn't make sense? They should be putting in a sidewalk because of where they are. So my feeling, and you know, I'll confess, I'm a lawyer, and so I like having standards. I like having objective factors, so that I'm not sitting there as a council member and saying, well, they seem like really nice people. You know, I don't want to be subjective. I like having an objective ordinance, and you say, you know, and describe in the ordinance, when would you not have to build a sidewalk and when should you? I mean, we've had some people come in and it would be physically impossible to put a sidewalk. That their house represented an actual physical hardship, because the road runs right, it's an old house, runs right up against their house, their front porch, and there is physically no space between where the existing road is and their front porch, but they're subdividing and want to build another house. So that would require sidewalks in both. So I think where we go from here is we take a look at the ordinance. We have listened to what all of you all say, and maybe our ordinance needs to be tweaked. And that's like a solicitor type of job. We have a solicitor here.
Or perhaps you keep it in place, this Title 20, Chapter 20, you continue to grant waivers as you have for valid residents. So we have the ability to look at it and do some due diligence as a council and say, every single one of your neighbors has a sidewalk. We're not going to give you a waiver. Everyone in your area has a sidewalk. You're not getting a waiver, but everyone in the valley, none of you has a sidewalk. That's grounds for a waiver. It's not about hardship, it's about that no one else has it, there's no connectivity. So just, it sounds like there's more due diligence and more work on your side to keep signing the papers, but no one's plugged in 50 times with the signer, right?
No, we're kind of running out. I've been keeping track.
I think to Karen's point, and I don't disagree with what you're saying, we could keep the ordinance on the books, but then we'd like to have something objective, so it's not every time someone comes to us and asks for a step, we don't go, oh, wait a second, what are all the issues with this one? We can have a clear set of standards that says, here are the times that we waive it, here are the times where we do not. So if you live in the valley, we waive it.
As the valley evolves, there's 275 houses. What percentage of it? Once we get above this percentage, that's when sidewalk ordinance kicks in.
Yeah, so if anyone else wants to come up and comment.
I have a question for council.
You really should come up.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
'Cause
I'm
we're-
just concerned
We're
that you're
taking
not gonna
minutes
be
on
able-
this,
yeah.
because this is available to
Yeah.
people online who can't be here tonight and maybe want to know what the discussion is and start sending us emails. So go ahead.
Go, I love the open discussion.
My question is, for years, there was no problem at all. And this has come up in the past 10, 12 years since they changed this. Why don't you just leave it alone? Leave it alone in the valley. Because what's going to happen is other people start seeing this, and they're going to be giving you guys a hard time. I mean, we're here now, but like I said, there's over 250 people, homes in this valley, and they start getting out to putting sidewalks in. Man, I think the ordinance should be changed. You don't need them in there at all. Only under the new construction of 10 to 12 houses or more in a development. Leave it alone. It's worked for 80-some years we've had the township. Okay, and they built before, and you can tell with the 2-story houses up here on Mill Creek, they did it before and up on Hilltop. Just leave it alone.
So for council here, it sounds like there's a consensus that they want to, we want zones where maybe it doesn't make sense for sidewalk, right? So maybe send out a survey like you've done in the past, and if the residents in the valley vote that they don't want a sidewalk, then, keep issuing the waivers. But there are other areas in the township where it might make sense. So keeping the code in and then having those exception zones might make sense where, it's subjective, it's a really clear-cut answer. Like, hey, if you're in these boundaries here, you don't. Maybe you're on a main access road and you do. And you align it to your 2040 plan, which the residents did all that work on, and everybody could have participated in if they wanted to. And then, that was one of the goals, was to make it walkability. So you're not, discarding all the work that was done by the residents just a couple of years ago to create the vision of the future for Plymouth Township, the 2040 plan. But at the same time, you're also hearing the concerns of the current residents of a certain area of the township. And so it's a way to kind of, balance that act where we can kind of make as many people as happy as possible. Because I recall one township meeting we were here, and there was a waiver being discussed for the, and excuse me, I don't know the address, but I remember the building. It's currently a State Farm office on Butler Pike. And I remember Karen saying, do we want to, there are no sidewalks on Butler Pike currently, but there is room for one, and eventually it could connect to something. And council at the time said, yeah, no, Butler Pike's definitely a zone where we want a sidewalk down the, eventually. So, when they tear down that State Farm office or whatever's there and rebuild whatever's there, they said, yeah, you got to put a sidewalk in there. So that's kind of a common sense approach here that we can take. I don't think you can waive the code completely, but I think there's a good balancing act here where we can, identify zones where it's residential. There's nothing you're connecting to. I mean, I would argue there could be in and out zones there. You got the middle school. There's tons of kids that walk, and then they're in the street at some point as well. But if you just say, hey, here's the zone where we're not, if you build in the zone where you are, then you're going to have to do it. And it becomes a little bit easier of a decision for council. And it's a little bit more transparent for everybody as well. So that would just be my common sense solution there. Thanks.
I think you bring up a good point, though. State Farm, I think, would technically be considered commercial, though. So that's...
I think they're putting up houses, but if I remember, it's a State Farm office with apartments above, and I think
Okay.
they built 2 townhomes like they did down on Fayette Street down in the Plymouth Township side of Fayette. So it's not that they're not building a commercial, they're building a townhome.
Okay, because that's something we've talked about, too, is commercial, yes, they're going to put in sidewalks.
For me, it was more,
Yeah.
Yeah, it was more of the discussion that night, and you can go back and watch the meeting. I forget when it was, but it was more about Butler Pike, high traffic rate. We would eventually want a sidewalk to go in there, no matter what's there, commercial or residential.
You want to say something? Okay.
I was just going to add, I mean, we really appreciate all the feedback. And it sounds like it's actually validating something we've talked about, which is having a set of criteria that help drive the decision. So if the ordinance were to remain on the books, maybe it's adjusted. So if X percentage of the people in the neighborhood, within 1,000 feet of you have sidewalks, then yes, you have to put one in too. So you don't become the only one without a sidewalk. If we're close to a point of interest, a church, a school, something else where we're trying to create a safer, walkable situation. So it sounds like, I just want to validate, it sounds like some of those objective criteria that have a rationale behind them for why yes versus why no would be acceptable. Is that true?
Butler Pike is totally new sidewalk. You're going to get plowed. But you are. I mean, it's high traffic, it's high volume. But to that,
Right.
it's ridiculous.
Right.
Okay? So I agree with that. If you have specific criteria,
We don't want to go after anyone.
well, I think it should be a township stuff.
I agree, because just because where you live now, I'm burdened with the homeowners, I live on the place, like everyone else in the valley. So I think there needs to be some fairness there, and if you're going to require
Hi.
My name is Frank Johnson. I live in Plymouth Meeting. I think you got to be consistent throughout the whole township, okay? You can't spot areas that you believe should have sidewalks, this shouldn't have sidewalks. I think you shouldn't put hardships on any residents to put new sidewalks, because you're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars. Could be 10, could be 20,000. You shouldn't tax the residents in that fashion with new sidewalks. So, and that should be consistent throughout the township.
I'm sorry, can you come back up to, I'm sorry, we're not going to pick all this up, and then the people aren't going to be able to hear it on the recording.
I'm just wondering why has this not been put in or thought about before as to find the funding for the township to put in the sidewalks if this is such an issue?
Like, you're talking about how much it would be for you to put in a sidewalk just at your house.
Yeah.
So if we were to say, that's a lot of money for us to spend to put in sidewalks all over the township.
But if you did it over a period of time, you guys could do it faster in probably a set period of time than it would happen one by one homeowner having to put in a sidewalk every time a home was renovated or built. Because there's plenty of people that are probably going to stay in their home until they're gone and leave with family or whatever. So it's very possible that house might not turn over ever.
Right.
Excuse me. I hear what your thought is. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Having sidewalks throughout the whole township. Who's going to incur that cost? The taxpayers.
Right.
Are
But I'm
you
saying,
going
if
to
we're
pay?
paying taxes
I don't
now-
know. What's the valley pay? $4,000 a year in taxes? 4 to 5,000. Would you like to pay $15,000 a year?
Definitely not, but
Okay.
I'm saying,
For who's going to be walking down the street? Nobody walks down on the sidewalks. Very rarely I see people walking down sidewalks.
well, we don't have sidewalks, so
I know in the valley you don't. People are walking in the valley, on the streets, okay? But throughout the community of Plymouth Township, rarely we see people walking down sidewalks. They're driving wherever they're going, point to point. We don't see many people on the street walking down sidewalks.
So, as I just mentioned, that I am a licensed planner, so I learned planning from books. So I hear the discussion about the money, like who's going to pay for it. That's the key discussion, I understand. So I just want to share one case, may or may not apply to here. California, 19th century-ish, whatever, where the terminology of easement is being developed. It's applied to the case that there is at the time, there was no public beach. There was only private beach. And there's a series of the townhouses who, like their neighbors, like one by one. And they all own a piece of the beach in their front yard. Basically, the beach is their front yard. The tax lot draw all the way into the water. So they are getting annoyed because right next to this portion is public beach. So all the tourists enjoys walking across their basically like quote unquote private beach every day. But so those the owners of those townhouses got super annoyed because technically they own that area, but they open the usage to the general public with or without permission, basically. That is the case is eventually that series of the residents basically sued the California government to do something with that. And that case is called Nolan versus California, whatever. Sorry, I've forgotten the name. But eventually the case landed into the result saying, okay, as long as you'd like to open the usage to the public, the owner of the residence should get a tax credit from there. So basically, they pay less tax because they share a portion of their property to the general public. So they do sort of maintenance. They don't pay for it. Well, they pay for it, yes, but they get tax benefit from this activity. So that's how they deal with in this case. I'm just sharing the case here. Don't know if it applies or not. Thank you.
All right, bear with me. I'm not a great public speaker. So I do concrete for a living. I've been doing Dan Kerper. I do concrete for a living. I've been doing it since I was 15 with the same company. We specialize in the ADA handicap ramps. So we think it's just as simple as putting in a sidewalk. You're not just simply putting in a sidewalk. You're talking now you have to go into people's driveway aprons. Now you're going to have to put in a concrete apron. Everything goes off of percentages. You need 2% on a sidewalk. So we get to a driveway apron, now we're putting in the concrete driveway apron, it has to be 2%. Now you're cutting back into people's driveways because now you have to do an asphalt adjustment to match the blacktop to the new concrete, okay? Also, on the other hand, now you have to do an ADA handicap ramp. And in order for you, now these sidewalks have to meet all the ADA compliant for everything under your 2%. Again, you're talking moving poles, it's not just as simple as, just slapping in the sidewalk. Now, you got to replace all the curbs. All the curbs are going to have to get replaced. They have to be the same height, again, slope down to your driveway apron. You're not just talking $10,000. You might be talking $20,000 just for homeowners to do this stuff. So again, I don't necessarily agree with it. The township gets liquid fuels money. Maybe you guys should take your liquid fuels money and go install some ADA handicap ramps first on these corners, and then maybe start with the sidewalks. Might be something to look into. I don't know. I think sidewalks are great, especially with the kids, but for me personally, I can't afford it. Again, here I am if I have to pay $15,000 for a sidewalk and then come wintertime my heater breaks, there's another 10 grand. Well, I just spent $15,000 on a sidewalk, so unfortunately I don't have the 10 grand to fix my heater. So then I got to go out and take out a loan and do all, you know what I mean? I don't think it's a good idea, personally.
So your opinion is we should change the ordinance?
Change the ordinance, yes. Thank you.
I also feel like it's important to mention that everything that's affecting the residents is also affecting the township. So everything, all the rising costs of everything is affecting us too. And we have other projects in the queue that have, the price of those has gone up. So I would love to say, let's spend the money and put sidewalks everywhere, but it may not be fiscally possible.
Chris, you can't spend public tax dollars on
There.
private property.
There you go.
Sorry.
I said that at the beginning and I didn't even remember it. All right.
My name is Steven Simpson. I live on Woodbrook. I've heard some concerns about the middle school because it's right in our backyard. These kids have a sidewalk all the way down to Woodbrook, and there is a resident 3 or 4 houses down from me, and she has a driveway that connects from Woodbrook to Belvoir Road. It's been there for as long as I can remember as a kid. These kids, and my stepson being one of them, and he got chewed out for it, these kids don't care. They're going to walk, they walk across her lawn, they walk through her driveway, they cut through there. Instead of walking the 10 extra feet on the sidewalk that we have, they cut through her property and walk through her lawn and everything else. A sidewalk isn't going to benefit that resident And I'm in the same boat as some of the people in this room. I have a 1,400 square foot house and I have a growing family. My plan is eventually one day to knock my house down and rebuild it. I don't want that sidewalk. The sidewalk goes to nowhere. My neighbors are there. They're not going anywhere unless they're forced out of the township. They don't plan on moving. So now I have a sidewalk on my property, my connecting property. They just sold the house. That house isn't getting knocked down. That's a whole another story that I won't bring up today. So they're not going to ever put a sidewalk in. And then the neighbor I share a driveway with, again, we brought up the question of the aprons. Where's the apron stop? If I have to put an apron in, where do I stop? In the middle of my driveway. So now it's a pain for them and me. It's just the whole thing. I'm against the sidewalks unless, like it's been said, unless it's paid for by somebody else and mandated through the whole valley. So, thank you.
I just want to make the comment, if this were to remain in place, but there be certain criteria, you have to really consider it, because a house like mine or Woodbrook, you probably have a lot more sidewalk around, but yet our houses will never connect to them unless other houses, like I'm so close to Germantown Pike and to the Sheffield neighborhood, there's tons of sidewalk there, but putting it on my property would never connect to any of that, so there's no benefit. So having just a general radius doesn't necessarily make sense either, because you have houses that will be in the valley that don't benefit from the houses in that radius that do have sidewalk. So just a point to make if that's the direction that you move.
You actually bring up a good point, because in our 2040 plan, isn't that how it's done? That's how they tried to determine where the sidewalks would be in the location to destinations, essentially. And when we looked at it, it didn't make sense, because it still had a lot of just a corner or a sidewalk to nowhere. So, good point.
So, back to the handicap ramps. That's technically federal law. So, if you guys put in sidewalks, the handicap ramp has to go in, and that is going to fall on the township. And also you guys can get state funding to put in these handicap ramps. That's also another thing. I'm drawing a blank. I lost my other key points. Sorry. If I figure it back out, I'll
Anyone else have anything to add that hasn't already been said? Council? All right, let's wrap it up. I appreciate you coming. And you can always reach out to us via email or give us a call if you have any more input. I guess we'll be looking at the ordinance.